He needs a new contract, but anyway.
Hey.
Details.
Yeah, happy NBA Free Agency Day. We got the very latest for you on Sports Dinner. She's Hannah Storm. I'm Jay Harris.
Yeah, free agency doesn't begin until 6 o'clock Eastern tonight, but there are some things we do know right now. The Warriors are set to offer Klay Thompson a 5-year, $190 million max contract. That's according to Woj. After tearing his ACL, Klay expected to return at some point next spring. Meanwhile, Kemba Walker plans to be in Boston today to finalize a formal agreement for a 4-year, $141 million deal with the Celtics. Walker coming off a season where he averaged a career high 25.6 points per game for the Hornets. He replaces Kyrie. Speaking of, Irving is likely headed to Brooklyn. Kyrie and the Nets reportedly motivated to reach a deal on a 4-year, $140 million max contract. With him coming there, the Nets will likely renounce D'Angelo Russell. And we welcome in the hardest working man in show business, NBA insider Adrian Wojnarowski, busy around the clock. So finally, it's ticking down to 6 p.m. today when free agency begins. What can we expect in the meantime?
Well, I think there are a lot of teams who are trying to keep their own players and stay out of free agency. And you have Orlando trying to keep Nick Vucevic, Terrence Ross, Milwaukee trying to keep Chris Middleton, Brook Lopez, two really important pieces to their championship contender. Indiana, Bojan Bogdanovic, they want to keep him there. So there are a lot of teams, trying to keep their guys from really entering the fray of unrestricted free agency.
I want to go back for a second. You and Ramona Shelburne reported yesterday that Kevin Durant and Kawhi Leonard have been discussing free agent scenarios that could include a future with them possibly playing together. Durant and Kawhi among the players meeting with multiple teams, so a final decision of where they'll go is going to be a few days. How will this impact teams with money to spend?
Well, you've got teams, especially, Brooklyn, who's involved with, Kyrie Irving, Kevin Durant, the Clippers, Lakers, who want to get Kawhi Leonard. Clippers also would love to get it, Kevin Durant. They'd love to pair those two. That's what I think that's been a little bit of the conversation between Durant and Leonard. But teams aren't going to jump into free agency for the most part until those two players have made decisions, because there's going to be such a domino effect. And I think agents are waiting with their players to see if Brooklyn doesn't get a second star, if the Knicks don't get any stars, all of a sudden, I think the Knicks want to put together a competitive team, and they're going to have to go, if they don't get a Durant, and even if they do, he's not playing this year, you're going to see the Knicks, I think, get into the marketplace, try to find some younger free agents who can help them put a competitive group on the floor. But until they know about KD, until they know about Kawhi Leonard, those big market teams who've been holding off and preparing for this big free agency, they're not going to spend their money until they know if they have a chance at one of those two.
And then Jimmy Butler, who you reported earlier this week that Houston would love to lure into a sign and trade with the Sixers. You've also reported he's meeting with the Heat. I mean, what's the likelihood that he stays in Philly?
Well, it's always a negotiation, and I think that's what's going to go on here between the Sixers and Jimmy Butler. Miami, Houston, they don't have salary cap space. They were both teams who tried very hard to trade for him in Minnesota earlier this season. If you remember, Houston offered 4 first-round picks. Miami thought they were right on the cusp of a deal. It fell apart. Now they're trying to kind of re-engage here with Philadelphia and see if there's a sign and trade where they could send players or create 3-team scenarios where maybe some money goes in a third direction and Philly doesn't have to take back so much. That's a conversation that starts tonight at 6 o'clock when free agency opens.
Yeah, really interesting scenario there in Philly with Harris and Redick and Butler as well. You're on it. He's all over it. Our man, Adrian Wojnarowski. Thanks.
Thanks, guys.
Aforementioned big free agent stars. Look at this, Matt. It's a group that's accounted for 8 NBA titles, has a pair of former Rookies of the Year in KD and Kyrie, and 2 multi-time Finals MVP winners in Durant and Kawhi Leonard.
Injuries with a couple of them scare me. It's a lot of money for an injury. So the headlines today, tomorrow, and likely over the next week will involve the NBA and free agency. As you know, 6 p.m. Eastern the fun begins.
Yes, you could say that one team's already having fun in Brooklyn because it's an enviable spot to have a 23-year-old all-star coming off a career year that helped lead you to the playoffs, and he is your backup plan. That's because despite extending a qualifying offer to D'Angelo Russell, league sources tell Adrian Wojnarowski that the Nets and Kyrie Irving are meeting today and moving toward a max 4-year deal worth $141 million. The team still pursuing Kevin Durant as part of their plan to nab 2 max contract deals. Now, as for the potential odd man out here, it appears time heals all wounds, as Woj is also reporting D'Angelo Russell and the Lakers have mutual interest in reuniting 2 years after the team that drafted him traded him to the Nets. The Lakers also reportedly interested in fellow guards Patrick Beverley and Seth Curry.
All right, so these meetings likely to happen because it appears the first free agency domino to fall today will be Kemba Walker to the Celtics. Woj reporting that Kemba plans to be in Boston on Sunday to finalize a formal agreement of a 4-year, $141 million deal. Walker plugs a guard hole left in Boston, of course, with Kyrie out. What about Jimmy Butler? He will also be busy meeting with teams. And first out of the gate, the Heat in South Florida today ahead of a meeting with the Houston Rockets next week. Butler's meeting with the Rockets will likely take place early next week in Los Angeles. So another thing to consider as free agency starts, the league's salary cap is going to go up on Monday. The cap for the 2019-2020 season will be just over $109 million, up a little over $7 million from this past season. Not a free agent until next year. Don't worry about it. The cap is projected to again go up in 2020 and 2021.
Speaking of Woj, Jim, 6:09 p.m., league sources telling him that Jimmy Butler's expected to meet the Heat in South Florida today, with the Rockets most likely planning to meet with the All-Star early in the week. Out in L.A., Sixers also working on a plan with Jimmy Butler as well. We mentioned him, and magically, timestamp him. Here he is. Adrian Wojnarowski is live with us. I guess you could call this Christmas Day, right, for someone like you, as we are just a few hours away from the free agency officially opening up. So what can we expect to happen today before 6 p.m.?
Well, I think you'll see, before 6 and then right at 6, a flurry of deals, players staying where they are, some jumping, obviously Kyrie Irving, Kemba Walker. There'll be a lot of activity today. 40% of the NBA is a free agent.
Wow.
40% of the players. So, but ultimately, Kevin Durant, Kawhi Leonard, until they make a decision, that kind of holds up a lot of the bigger stuff, and then you'll see the floodgates open. But we're going to see a lot of deals today.
Let's talk about that with Kawhi and KD. You and Ramona reporting that yesterday about them discussing scenarios with which they could end up on the same team. The two teams that were listed were the Knicks and Clippers. If you're the Knicks and Clippers and hear that, how might you react now and move forward with this information?
I think both cautious, because there's so many scenarios where you have so many great players in free agency. You have, 4 big market teams, 2 in New York, 2 in LA, with multiple max salary slots. And so there's a lot of combinations that could go into play. That's a combination they have been talking about to see if there's any common ground there, if there's something that fits both of them. You're talking about 2 of the best 3 or 4 players by anybody's measure in the world. But I think for Kawhi Leonard, New York is really, while he may meet with them, they're not really a prime consideration. I think both are taking the Clippers seriously. I don't know that duo, that combination is a front runner to happen, but it has been a conversation, and we'll see how it plays out here in the next 24, 48 hours.
Yeah, let's talk about timing, though, because you do say we're going to get a flurry at 6 p.m., but on the other hand, Kawhi and KD are taking meetings throughout the week, so it could be a few days before we get a decision from them. If that were the case, how could it impact what happens in free agency if we have to wait a few days?
Well, let's look at the Brooklyn Nets, for example. They're hopeful that they're going to enter into an agreement tonight with Kyrie Irving, but they're not offering that second max slot until they know what Kevin Durant's doing. And then once Durant makes a decision, once Kawhi Leonard makes a decision, then the dominoes start to fall, whether it's players like Jimmy Butler, Tobias Harris in Philadelphia, who they very much want to re-sign. Al Horford is out there in free agency. And so once Durant, Kawhi move, then you'll start to see more big players come off the board.
Adrian Wojnarowski with the latest on what is a stacked and yoked NBA free agency that starts just a few hours from now.
And coming up, an age-old rivalry rearing its head over free agency. Why East versus West is a thing. Remember back in the early 90s?
Yeah.
East versus West?
Rap.
Not a baseball.
Where it was.
Mariners and Astros.